G'day and welcome to the Build Me a Brewery podcast, episode 1. If you haven't already, please make sure you have a listen to the introductory episode, which will give you a bit more insight into the main goals and content we'll be covering in this podcast series. And also, please make sure you like our Facebook page, simply Build Me a Brewery, and also visit our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and subscribe to our mailing list. We're still in the early stages of developing the site's content, but it will essentially become somewhat of a landing page for interested listeners to visit, where you'll be able to access much more content on the topic of opening your own brewery here in Oz. The first part of the series is titled Meet The Brewer, where I'll be meeting with co-founders and head brewers from 6 Sydney breweries to get their stories, insights and advice. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of being able to sit down with an absolute character of the craft beer scene. This is none other than Pat McInerney, one of the co-founders of Willie the Boatman out in St. Peters. And please disregard my intro with Pat where I say Marrickville. I was absolutely chuffed to bits to have Pat as my first guest on the show, and it was great to listen to his and another co-founder and longtime friend Nick Newey's story on how they started out and where the inspiration of the name Willie the Boatman came from. Now, as you're listening so far, this is my very first podcast interview, and audio engineering and ensuring background noise and overall quality isn't exactly my forte. Well, it wasn't at this point in time, but I've invested in much better gear and got a bit more savvy with cleaning up in the post-production side of things. So I can assure you the audio quality does get better throughout the series, so please be patient and stick with us. The content that I'll be sharing with you will also continue to evolve, and we'll be diving into much more interesting insights as we talk to many more professionals across the brewing and craft beer scene. So without further delay, I hope you all enjoy my chat with Pat McInerney from Willie the Boatman. I'm out in Sydney's inner west. I've been able to sit down with Pat McInerney, who has welcomed us along to their great brewery here. He's going to share with us a bit of insights about how they got started. Welcome, Pat.
Hey, Chris. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. I appreciate you sharing us a bit of your time. But Pat, you've been in the industry for what, since
7 years now?
7 years,
I know, it's gone very fast.
To kick things off, tell us a bit about, I guess, yourself, craft beer roots. You know, were you home brewers to begin with, what you were doing before pro brewing?
Yeah, sure. Look, I suppose like everyone in the industry, Nick, my former business partner, and myself were home brewers, and you know, we just, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, we got into whole grain brewing, and we really enjoyed it. We really liked our beer, and so, you know what, once in your life, you just have to back yourselves, and that's what we did, and Willie the Boatman was born. I mean, that's a very abridged version of what happened.
Yeah, and I know that you guys have got a lot of stories behind a lot of your beers and also the name, so we'll get into that as well. But yeah. I guess when you were doing the home brewing side of things, what sort of systems were you working on? What sort of size? Franken brew, yeah.
Yeah. Like Nick is an engineer and is a very clever man.
Yep.
And so really we were using a hodge, like most people at home. We're using eskies and a Mongolian burner and a big urn, and then we bought a kegel. I was working at the brew shop in Peakhurst at the time,
right,
we got access to a lot of really good homebrew equipment. So as time went on, our equipment got more and more elaborate and more expensive, and but the beer got better,
Yeah,
so,
well, it does. I started out doing the brew in a can, the extract stuff, and
there's nothing wrong with that either.
No, you can make some great beers, but when you make that jump to all grain, like a lot of people have said to me, you never really look back. So.
Nah. And the cost is secondary,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
When you're brewing at home with an all-grain system, really, it's not much more. It's not a lot cheaper than coming in here and buying a finished product.
No,
but it's the joy. It's the absolute joy of creation.
And what was the first beer you brewed then?
All-grain?
Let's go with all grain.
Yeah, we'll go all grain. It was an IPA, of course.
IPA.
West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
And then the next one was just a straight Aussie Pale Ale. And then one of my mates didn't want to have a high alcohol beer. Like, you know, a lot of home brews tend to, even at all grain, tend to be a little bit hot and a little bit alcoholic. Mm-hmm. So we brewed a golden ale, which then became our first beer, commercial beer released. And that was called the Foo Brew, and Hamish Foo, we brewed it for his 40th birthday. Okay. So, that was about 9 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So a lot of your homebrew background has sort of helped you dial in some of the recipes that you've got on tap now?
Absolutely. Look, I have to say there's a lot of the recipes, a lot of our core range come from the backyard. I mean, they're vastly different. But, you know, essentially, you know, Crazy Ivan, Elbow, Black Bunny, Lager, our XBA, all come from the backyard, but they're finessed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very finessed.
Well, there's I guess, I know a lot of small breweries will use their old homebrew kits as a bit of a pilot system to then, you know, take that up to that commercial level.
Sure.
And, I guess we'll get into some of the equipment side and that sort of transition from smaller kits to bigger kits. But so I guess what a lot of the listeners want to learn about, and especially myself, is learning about the brewery, how you guys got into this, and you know, where the idea of the brewery came from. Yeah, I guess just take us through a little bit of a step by step of how it came to be.
Sure. As I mentioned about Hamish and his beer for the 40th birthday, Nick and I were really brewing not only for ourselves but for our neighbours and ultimately our community, because everyone used to knock on my back door and say, "Oh, what beer have you got in the shed today?" So people would just pop over. And then finally my then wife said to me, "Look, I've got to stop having strange men coming over. It's when you're not home, they're asking for beer." And so anyway, so that kind of led to to Willie the Boatman being born. That was one of the catalyst points. Well, let's go back to the actual origins of the name, and that's Willie the Boatman. So about 16 years ago, I've got to think about how old my daughter is. So about 16 years ago, I went on a history walk of my local area, which was Tempe.
Okay,
Nick Newey and myself both lived in Tempe with our families, lived very close to the river. So I was just interested into the neighbourhood that I moved in on, and I learnt about the history of the Cooks River, but I also learnt about a gentleman, a Scottish highwayman called William Kerr, who was sent to Australia and was then an indentured slave at the landed gentry's house in Tempe, and it was his job to row the boat across the Cooks River, which would have been a lot bigger river than what it is today. And he was known as Willie the Boatman. And I just thought, all the way back then, I just went, you know what a cool name. That's such a great name. So I just put it in the back of my mind, and then finally when Nick and I started home brewing, we started calling my back shed Willie the Boatman Brew House. It just all sort of fell into place. You know, we both really liked the name, and our wives liked the name and stuff like that.
It is very unique, and I guess you've got that story behind it. And did you ponder on other names for a while?
Not at all. No. It was just, it felt so natural to us. And I mean, you know, we're talking to Matt Kirkard about the saleability or the expansion of that name because it's so local. I mean, he was saying, "Oh, can you really do that?" And I go, well, you know, at the end of the day, local breweries are just as important as international breweries. So if it makes me just a local good brewery, then I'm pretty well happy with that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's you've built a pretty big fan base here in the local area. So, and I think the local independent scene is even becoming a national one as well, where people are, you know, small independent breweries, you know, they're selling their stuff all over the country now. And
so we started So from the learning of the name to giving the back shed a name of the Willie the Boatman Brew House, to then finally deciding that we would both commit. I was in television and I really hated working in television. Nick was an engineer, and his jobs at the time, he worked on big events, so his jobs at the time were very limited to him. And that's when we both decided, and we said, oh, you know what, let's move forward with our brewing, and let's try and find some equipment, which then led us to buying, our wives firstly agreeing to remortgage the houses.
And how that conversation go? Was it a difficult one?
No, surprisingly, they were both very supportive, and both really excited about Lisa and Anne, Lisa, Nick's wife, and my then wife. We're both really excited about the prospect of having a small business and running a small brewery. Yeah. It was still at that time, it was fairly unique in Sydney. Certainly not unique now.
No. What's how many? There's about 10 or 12.
Yeah, there's 8 in the inner west.
Yeah.
So it was really young Henry's batch, us, wayward, grifter. Source.
Yeah. And it's sort of like you all closely know each other, you all brewed on each other's systems or help out each other. Where there's a lot of contract brewing that's been going on and gypsy brewing,
And that's the other thing. There's not to mention the bloody gypsy no offence to gypsy brewers, not to mention the gypsy brewers. It's a pretty tight community. In saying that, though, we don't see a lot of each other because we're all bloody busy. So just so we were the number 3 brick and mortars brewery in Sydney. So like I said, Henry's batch us. Our first equipment, because we didn't have a lot of money, was ex-dairy equipment.
Right, yep.
And we kind of were known as the Frankenstein brewery because we didn't have, the lovely new stainless steel Premier kits Batch had. We certainly didn't have the DME equipment that Henry's had. It was pretty much what we could afford.
Very raw system.
It was a very raw system. It was just a 1,500 litre home brew kit. That's all it was. One button that controlled the whole thing. Water on, water off.
Wow, so very manual intensive.
Very, very manual intensive. And to be honest, we're going from 50 litres to 1,200 litres. It was a lot more challenging than we expected.
Yeah. So when you set out, really getting the brewery up and running, what sort of concept did you want to go with? So what sort of model was it? Always wanted to become a brew pub, or have something in the tap room, or want to go production brewery, take it nationally, or
no? I think our initial idea was just to keep a local brew house, like brew pub, I should say. And it was very much, in our old place. We're in the new place now, but in our old place, it was very much a men's shed. It was all corrugated iron. It was fairly rustic. Everything was made by us because we had absolutely no money. But we ticked along. We worked with a lot of people to help improve our beer over the years after getting some feedback from punters and from Untapped. Thank you very much. So I convinced Nick that we should get Neil Cameron in. And Neil was fantastic. So Neil flipped our brewery around overnight. He just came in and looked at our processes, and processes are so important at a brewery. He said, he just basically pointed out, 95% there. It was just that 5% that was holding us back. And working with the brewers and working with me and working with Nick, we're able to, within a year, we've gone from 0 at awards to winning gold medals. So it's just sort of, and it was really from winning a couple of gold medals that we really sort of started to really critically, and the brewers really got involved in the making process. And Joel, our head brewer, really took it upon himself to be the perfectionist and be the purist. And it was fantastic to see people going, oh crap, that's a Willie the Boatman beer, that's fantastic. I like the guys, but I'm not sure I like their beer.
And what was can you remember that moment when you sort of, beer was on tap somewhere, or, it was in a situation where, that's my beer and everyone's loving it, it's up in lights, like, can you remember that moment?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, Dove and Olive. It was great, Dove and Olive. I think we did a Battle of the Brewers, and then got a tap down there all month.
I was actually speaking with is it Chris O'Connell, who's the publican for but Pierce Tommen runs that place. He was describing to me the Battle of the
Brewers,
yes, and I think you guys won. What month was it?
We won a year.
Like won a year,
Like we were in the grand final and we won the year. So it was sensational, and it was, and you could just feel what's it called? The uplifting, the swing behind us. The wind really changed from where we felt. I felt that we're battling with issues of consistency. We really flipped that around.
Yep.
And then for the next 2 years, we grew from strength to strength. And but in our original brewery, we were limited to what we could produce, like 3,000 litres a week. We were hamstrung by just by the lack of space, by the lack of cellar.
Yep.
And also financially, we couldn't really afford to move out, and I suppose, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, Chris, is that one thing I've never backed away from, and I'll never back away from telling people, is don't ever be afraid to ask for capital investment.
Right, okay.
It's really, a brewery is a fucking expensive business to run.
Yep.
It has very little margins.
Yep.
And you've got to produce a shitload to make any money.
Yep.
So,
and these are the sort of statements I guess myself and aspiring brewery owners need to hear is the realities of it.
Yeah.
It's not just drinking beer and having fun with your mates.
No, it's definitely not. Look, that's a large part of it, and I wouldn't change anything of the last 7 or 8 years. I've absolutely loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, we've come close to losing it. So a couple of times. So you really need, unless you've got a substantial amount of money behind you.
Yep.
You're really going to do it tough.
Yep.
In the industry.
Yep.
And I don't know about the other owners or how. I'm very frank about that. We've got 3 capital investors in this business who have taken us from a very small warehouse in St. Peter's to a relatively large warehouse with a brand new, beautiful stainless steel brewery. And you know what? We spent nearly $1.5 million overnight. Just bang. Wow. There you go. $1.5 million gone.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you know what? Our beer, we've got a bigger cellar, so we can produce more. We've got a much better brewing system. Our beers are, seriously, I would pit them against any other brewery in Australia. Yep. In terms of quality, and we've gone from a 2-kilometre radius of the brewery to sort of now pretty well servicing almost the east coast of Australia.
Wow!
And that's in a matter of That's in a matter of 12 months.
So that injection of investment has allowed you to produce more, keep up with that demand, and access those distributors that can send your beer far and wide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing is that the new brewing kit, opposed to the old Frankenstein kit, or the eBay kit as I called it, eBay stroke Bunnings kit. It's just you've got to have good equipment, you've got to have good people behind you, and you've got to have a shitload of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
it's not
that's what I keep
sport.
hearing. It's not an e-commerce business you're setting up that you can start at only a few dollars. It's very capital intensive to start out. So.
Very capital intensive to start out, and continuous. As everyone will bang on, because a brewery's biggest expense is after the wages or salaries. The biggest expense is the tax.
Yeah, so the excise side of things.
And if you haven't got it, and they'll let you go a month, they might let you go 2 months, but they're going to call you in.
Yep.
And if you can't pay it, guess what? You're gone.
And there's been some recent, what's the best way to describe it, a bit of
reprise from the ATO about excise rebates.
Yes.
So is it rebates up to 100K at the moment?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's 100,000 or 30% of your, or 30 or 40%, one or the other.
So I guess without going into a long-winded sort of topic about it, but for those that aren't aware of the taxes involved with craft beer in general,
beer, yeah,
tell the listeners, I guess, what excise exactly is.
So excise is a tax that is on alcohol, or basic excise on ethanol is the best way.
Yep.
So a 6% beer, a 6% West Coast IPA in 375 mils has 6% ethanol. So you're paying tax on that 6%.
Yep.
But when you're producing, 2, 3, 400,000 litres a year,
Adds up, yeah.
it adds up. And you pay it. We pay it monthly. Some people pay it weekly. But it works out from, like, I'd classify us as a medium-sized brewery now. Small, probably on the large side, so small on the small side of medium.
Yep.
And it's about $20,000 to $30,000 a month.
Wow.
So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money that I wish I got paid that much.
Yeah. And do you think that is probably a big thing that's holding back the industry?
Yeah, look, it is and it's not. I mean, look, I think that, and you're going to come across this conversation a lot over your travels during this podcast, but when you look at a winemaker who gets their first $500,000 of profit tax exempt, and a brewer who gets their first $100,000 tax exempt, there's a big variance in both of the industries who are essentially, at the end of the day, making that one thing, which is booze.
Especially wine's more greatly consumed than beer as well.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, but we're never going to get rid of the tax.
Got to live with it, yeah.
Yeah, we've got to live with it, and really, it's just something you've got to pay. You've got to have it in your bank account every month, and if you don't, you've got to call up the tax department and explain why and how you can pay that back. But I'm sure there's others who you're going to talk to over this period who will explain that.
Yeah. Okay, so Pat, what our listeners, I guess, would probably benefit from the most would be, I guess, lessons learned. You've got the advantage of foresight, owning a brewery, been in the industry for many years. I guess this segment is to share some insights on people just starting out or looking at doing their research, and I guess what they need to be considering when doing their investigation and business plans. So what were the biggest challenges that you found building the brewery?
Oh, look, I won't be Robinson Crusoe in saying this, but it's certainly the dealing with the local council. Right. Absolutely. You deal with councillors who tell you yes, 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 and then you deal with the bureaucrats who say no, 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 no. So, like for instance, and this is just a side note to this conversation, but because this topic is incredibly important.
Yeah.
For instance, when we first opened, Marrickville Council wouldn't let us have a food truck, but the police would shut us down if we didn't have a food truck.
Oh, right.
So, you know what I mean?
So
you have two branches of state government working against each other and essentially working against you. So it was just, it was absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The bylaws or whatever they're called, the SEPs, the LEPs, it really works against you. So if you've got an idea of opening a brewery, the first thing you should do is go and talk to your local planning officer at your council, because they are the guys who are either going to make or break your dream. I mean, I can't talk with great education or with great knowledge, but I know of Pete Phillips' story over at Wayward, where I think he had 2 or 3 sites before he got into his current one.
Well, okay.
And knocked back. So really, the first thing 12 months out, is you should start talking to your council.
Yep.
Find a spot. or find a neighbourhood that you're interested in, and then start talking about what are the restrictions on that neighbourhood, or if you can actually have a licensed premise in that neighbourhood.
Yep.
I mean, as you know, most breweries are industrial sites, and that's for two reasons. One, you're allowed to have manufacturing in industrial sites, and also the floor space is a lot cheaper. So that's the reason why we're all hidden out in industrial estates.
So and you do find that a lot of breweries are, like, they're not necessarily in and around your retail sort of outlets. They're very much in industrial areas. So what exactly is, I might vary council to council and also state to state, but what is the preferred zoning for building a brewery?
LN1 or LN2, which is the light industrial.
Light industrial, yeah.
So we're now this site where we are in Mary Street, St Peters, was LN1, so light industrial. And when we first opened, we were licensed for 25 people, but because we were seen as this is crazy, right? And the bar was seen as an auxiliary business to our main purpose of business, which was manufacturing beer. We're only allowed to have 6 seats.
Okay, yeah.
So, and as a tasting room, you're only allowed to come in and buy one of each beer before you had to leave.
Wow, okay.
So that's the council's ruling on what happens, because LN1s are only allowed, or LN1 areas or light industrial estates are only allowed to have Greasy Joe fish and chip shops for the workers to come and get their chicken roll at lunch, or a factory or a distribution centre. So working with the council and working with the council, we kind of were able to sort of loosen up those restrictions on us. And then working with the police, we were once again, I mean, when we first went to the police and we said, hey, when saw our Newtown licensing officers who have been fantastic, to be perfectly honest, they've been brilliant to us. They only wanted us to serve 100 mils.
Right, okay.
Per serve, that was it. So you could come in, you could have 600 mils of beer, and then you were asked to leave. So you really got to get these people on board before you even start. Before you put your hand in your wallet, this stuff is free.
And the Inner West Council has sort of consolidated, I guess. Was it Newtown Council that you were on? Ashfield, Leichhardt, and Marrickville. Yeah, right. Okay. So, and they would have a bit of experience up their sleeve now dealing with local brewery startups now compared to, say, some of your Western Sydney councils.
Yeah. You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You'd think so, but no.
No. Okay.
You'd think if I was the head of policy at the Inner West Council, wouldn't you write? Okay, we've got 8 breweries in the area. Why don't we write a policy document that outlines what they can and can't do, where they can and can't be? It's just ridiculous.
So it's still very blurred.
It's still really blurred.
Wow.
There's seriously, I mean, I forget what the figures are of how many people we employ. Not just me, but the Inner West Brewers collectively, how many people we employ, how many people we bring to the area every weekend. I mean, there must be thousands of people every week. Well, pre-COVID, there were thousands of people in the area going to breweries, going on the crawl. Would have 300 to 400 people on a Saturday come through the brewery, and then move on to the next one, and then, and then stay in the area, have dinner, go to the pub, go to a restaurant, So it's a very valuable industry for a council to have in their local area, and it's a really positive industry to have in the local area as well. So Marrickville's gone from having the most brothels, known to be the most brothels in Australia, to now having the most breweries in Australia.
That's a nice change, I guess.
It's a very nice change, right? Yeah. If you work in the council, I reckon I'd be pretty proud of the latter.
Yeah. So and the Inner West Council has been very vocal and I've done a lot of marketing towards, they're wanting to create a Hunter Valley type area for the inner west for beer.
Sure.
And do you think? You guys probably in this area do have the most concentrated amount of breweries probably in the state.
I think we might be even in the world.
Really?
Yeah. Once again, ask Peter Phillips. he can wax much more on that about that than I can. But look, the Inner West is fantastic. This is a classic example of where businesses who are in the, or where a group of companies who are basically essentially competitors can get together and work together and create an amazing scene for not only ourselves and our community, but for everyone in the state or everyone, even international tourists pre-COVID.
Yeah, and I guess and that's an area I want to explore as well about how you guys are handling the COVID. I guess just carrying on with a few more lessons learned. So,
yes.
If you were to go back and do it all again with the knowledge and experience that you had, I guess what would you do differently?
I'd have 10 times the amount of money. We started with 150k, and everyone said we couldn't do it. We did do it, and we survived. But I wouldn't open a brewery without under $1 million nowadays.
And that's something I constantly hear more money, and I've also heard from a lot of other breweries, mostly in the US, that say they started out too small.
Yeah, and I think everyone does.
Yeah.
When you go from home brewing 50 litres to even getting our first tanks were 600 litres. I mean, within a month they were too small. And then we got 1,200 litre tanks, and within a month they were too small.
Were you blown away by the demand so early on?
Completely blown away. Completely blown away by the demand. I mean, just your local area. I mean, in the West, we're pretty blessed here in terms of where all the pubs want their local beers on their taps, local restaurants, local bars. Everyone wants their local beers on tap, and it's fantastic. It's it's like a utopia for and it's still like that. Still 7 years in, it's still you go to the Golden Barley and every brewery has a tap. You go to the Henson Hotel, every brewery on tap. You go to the White Cockatoo, the Bank Hotel, Webster's. I could just keep going. Sydney Park Hotel. It's just the publicans are incredibly supportive of the brewing scene because we bring business to them as well as they give us business. By once again having that massive manhood walking around the neighbourhood, and predominantly is men. So they got to stop and have a piss and grab a cheeky schooner before they get to the next place. You know what I mean? Or they might want a snitty or So it's a symbiotic relationship.
I recall hearing your interview with Mark Kierkegaard on Radio Brews. And you mentioned about how you guys have sort of changed your approach to since COVID had hit, what you're going after in terms of where your beer's being sold.
Sure.
So, you're not really chasing that tap real estate anymore. You're more focusing on packaging in bottle shops.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, I won't be Robinson Crusoe in saying that, I'm the only brewery owner doing this, because everyone's doing it. We were a 70% keg, 30% package, or probably 80% keg, 20% packaged, and we'd always get sales, but it's really hard when you're selling kegs for 300 and 350 and then expecting a publican outside your area to pay on time. So you end up basically spending more money chasing the dollars that you've earned through the sale of the keg than you do from selling the kegs. Do you know what I mean? It's almost cash zero selling kegs.
What are some of the standard days for payment for
Look, we all have 7 days, but pubs are big organisations. I'm not bagging out pubs. It's just that they're big organisations with probably 50 to 100 contracts out with different food suppliers, vegetable suppliers, beer suppliers, cider, wine, whiskey.
Yeah.
And then finally there's Fat Pat from fucking St. Peter's, ringing him up saying, where's your $300? And he's going, yeah, mate, you can get it next month.
Yeah, so you're very low down on the priority list.
Very low down. And, and I understand that, because I understand that pubs are really, really expensive and big operation. Even a little corner pub is a big operation, really. So when you go into cans, what happens is, one, you open up your market you open yourself up to a much, much bigger market. Obviously the sales are a lot smaller, but they're easier to come by. And people love tinnies. People, the craft industry, punters have just gone crazy for tinnies. So before COVID, we were 50% in long necks and probably 50% in bottle long necks. Mm-hmm. Long necks don't cut it. Don't do long necks. If you go into a brewery, they're awesome. I love a King Brown, but no one wants them. They're too hard to put on shelves.
Is it just the perception of a long neck, or is it how big a long neck is?
Yeah, look, it's shelving. It's all about, really, in retail. And one thing I've learned, I always knew it in restaurants and cafes, in anything. It's all about shelf real estate. So the more you can put on the shelf, the more you can sell. And with tinnies, look at the fridge just out here. You've got two double stacked shelves. There's probably, in that half full fridge, there's probably 50 cases of beer. So there's a lot of beer in that fridge.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of potential sales in that fridge. So, and to the consumer, rather than going out and buying a case. And the other thing I love about the craft drinker, and I do it myself, I love going mixing, matching.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people are doing now with the pack text. You can
it's
easily.
Great, isn't it? And it's a really effective. It's an effective economical way to enjoy and discuss a wide range of beers without a huge commitment at a pub over a night.
Do you think that, and that was a question I wanted to bring up a bit about the packaging, was bottles versus cans, and from what I've learned is, because I've always had this perception that beer tastes better out of a bottle, but I think it's
that was a glass company telling you that.
Possibly.
I remember Neil Cameron said at one of the first craft beer conferences I ever went to before. This is nearly 10 years ago. Beer and Brewer ran a craft beer conference in the city, and Nick and I went along. And Neil Cameron said, The thing is about cans. The only thing different about cans is ACI, the glass company, told us all that beer tastes better out of a bottle.
Yeah.
But the one thing we forget about beer is that when we go to the pub, we're drinking out of a can. We're drinking out of a 50-litre keg.
Yes.
So really, that's not true. Beer doesn't taste better out of a bottle.
Yep.
Matter of fact, beer should taste much better out of a can.
I guess, yeah. Well, it's coming from something of similar nature, so.
Well, yeah, and look, there's no light.
Yep.
So you don't get light strike as you do in a bottle.
Yep.
Which light strike can happen in 15 minutes of being in the sun.
And that increases the chance of staling.
Yeah, well, it happens instantly.
Yeah.
It tastes like a paper bag. You go
like cardboard fill.
Yeah, that's it. There's little to no oxygen. Yeah, theoretically, hopefully, if you've got a good canning run. No, which is true. Easier to carry. Infinitely recyclable, and so therefore easier to dispose of.
Yeah.
And in terms of packing, you can put 100 cases onto a pallet and put it on a truck, and it's out the door. There's just so many things
so many more positives out of it.
Yeah.
And then that's some of the things I'd learnt from some of the US podcasts I'd listened to over the last 12 months is, that big shift away from bottles to cans. And even some of the bigger craft breweries like Stone and Wood are starting to make that move as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the other thing, which is not really spoken about, but as a business owner, in the first 3 years, my back was ruined by lifting and moving freaking kegs.
Yeah.
My biggest worry now is that one of my guys who's working, one of my brewers or one of my assistant brewers goes into a fridge and moves the keg the wrong way, he or she's going to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
So the other advantage of working predominantly with packaged beer is it's better for the workers' health.
Yeah. Yep. Lighter, less manual handling.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another topic I wanted to talk about was, we did touch about it, food offerings in the brewery, and I've noticed that a lot of breweries, and you guys are probably also involved in introducing a lot of food trucks now. There seems to be that relationship with local food trucks coming in on a weekly basis. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Look, we never intended on putting a kitchen in, and I still don't ever intend on putting a kitchen in. We make beer and not hamburgers.
Yep.
So we know how to make a great beer. We don't know how to make a great hamburger.
Yep.
So the thing is, working with the food trucks, it's, one, it gives you variety, so you're not serving the same hamburger every week. Two, or the same food every week. And two, food trucks have followings too, so it's a fantastic relationship that you can have with the food trucks, and we have tremendous relationships with all our food providers because people in the neighbourhood go, Bafana Lab's here, or Beefed Up burgers are here, or let's go to Willie's and grab a burger, or grab a Bafana, or grab some Portuguese food.
Yep.
Some Sri Lankan food or whatever, and let's go. And so it works really well with the breweries. It works really well. Look, this is sort of across all breweries. I know some in the inner west are putting in kitchens. There's two, I think. But yeah, that's never our intentions. I really like working with the food trucks. It's a fantastic relationship, and it's mutually beneficial as well. Yeah,
and are they reliable? Do you find that most of them do show up?
Oh yeah, I've never had one that's never shown up. I've certainly booked two accidentally.
Just to be safe,
which is pretty embarrassing and pretty horrible, because they've gone out and bought a heap of food thinking that you're going to sell a heap of food.
And with the food truck side of things, surely that's increased the average amount of time someone spends in your brewery.
Let me tell you, man. If you don't have a food truck, and once again, I won't be the only one who says if you don't have a food truck, you'll lose 30% of your day's trade.
Well, okay.
Well, sitting around, you're boozing on, you want to have something to eat.
Yep.
Even though I'm trying not to eat fucking food truck food. I love it. If on days when we haven't had a food truck, I've sent stuff home. It's just, for whatever reason, I think, we couldn't book one. I forgot about a day. I used to do it all. Now I don't. I hand it off to one of my team, and they organise it all. So it's a lot more streamlined these days. But there you go. I don't know whether that made sense, Chris.
No, that's.
I was watching Joel. Put it down there.
Just so the listeners, obviously they can't see what's going on. We're just in one of the boardrooms in the brewery, and there's guys all over the place running wires, drilling holes in walls. So,
chaos.
It's obviously great to be doing it rather than over the phone here. Here in the brewery, but. Anyway, so I guess we talked a bit about some of the industry insights, and probably just coming towards the end of this, but where do you see the future of craft beer, not only here in the inner west in Sydney, but I guess in Australia? Probably just talk a bit about some of the beer trends that are going on, and if that's something you guys want to get involved in, or you just want to run your own ship, boat, should I say? Pardon the pun.
No, that's all right. I do it all the time. It's a Sparky, by the way. We're putting in a new power system. Extending our power board.
There you go, guys. Happy days. This is a brewery.
Yeah, it's a working brewery, that's for sure. I'll just wait for a
All right, sorry guys, we're back.
Just having a new 15-amp power point put in for food trucks, by the way.
Well, there you go. It's nicely tied in there.
So I've forgotten the question, dude. So,
industry insights.
Beer trends and stuff like that.
What are your thoughts?
Look, trends. Where I see the industry growing, I only see growth in our industry. I think we've still got a long way to go in terms of our picking up more punters who are dedicated drinkers. So I think there's a lot of room in our market to grow and extend out to beer drinkers. The sour movement in Australia is absolutely huge. And the great thing I love about the sour beers is it brings in non-traditional beer drinkers. So it's very... Is
it bringing in sort of your more female sort of demographic?
Yeah, it's much more female oriented. But the blokes love it too.
Yep.
I'm only a recent convert to the sour beers. It was like I didn't understand why my kids ate sour gums.
Yeah. No, I'm more of a savoury person.
I'd much rather barbecue shapes than a sour snake or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
But the sour movement in Australia is absolutely huge. Globally it's huge, and I really see that not going away at all.
Yep.
On the flip side of the sour, it's the hazy craze, the haze craze. I really don't see that going away for another year or two.
And that's what I hear from a lot of other breweries saying that hazies are just a fad.
Just a fad?
A fad.
Well, it's been about what? How long's the... We produced the first commercial New England IPA about 4 years ago, and the haze craze is probably stronger than it's ever been.
Okay. Well, so a bit of misconception there. So
I think so.
So do you think... So going back to your earlier comment, you mentioned that you don't think it's here to stay, or is it?
No, I think it's here to stay.
Oh, right, okay, sorry.
I absolutely think it's here to stay. I think, today next week we're canning a breakfast oat IPA, which is it's a breakfast juice. It looks like a breakfast juice, smells like a breakfast juice, and the amount that we're canning is almost pre-sold.
Wow, okay.
And we're putting out sours next month, and once again, they'll pretty well be pre-sold.
And what about, it seems like a lot of breweries and some of the well-known ones are starting to enter that low alcohol or no alcohol category. Yeah,
look, it's really clever. I saw Stone & Wood just released yesterday a zero alcohol or near zero alcohol beer. It's something I've toyed with a lot mentally. It's always in the background. I always read articles. I'm fascinated with the low alcohol craze. It is certainly one of the biggest SKUs growing in the alcohol, or particularly in the beer range at the moment.
Yep.
It makes a lot of sense to have a no alcohol or a zero alcohol or a near zero alcohol beer to me. Just because of, community or social responsibility about getting in your car, reduces the risks of people drink driving, and people can feel like they're a part of the group without feeling isolated. And so there's, apart from the social stigma of going to a party and saying you don't drink, there's also a lot of other reasons why people love the taste of beer, but they just don't want to get pissed.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more healthy conscious people out there that are looking at. I don't know if I'm a big believer in the low carb stuff.
No.
I mean,
look at me.
But I think low alcohol definitely has a place to be within the segment.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be a big part of the segment next summer. Yeah, I really do. Not this summer. I think that we'll start to see, some bigger breweries, because it's not an easy process to make low alcohol.
And I've learnt that. Yeah, I thought it would have been easier. You just don't have to hit your targets or something.
No. So it's quite a process.
Yeah.
So with the low alcohol sort of segment emerging, like I said earlier, it probably won't be this summer where you see a lot of small breweries making it. Just purely, I think it might be a process issue. Certainly with us, it seems really complicated, and at the moment I'm just not ready to give it a go. But I'm extremely interested in producing a low or zero alcohol beer.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Just going back to the COVID side. when that first hit our shores, probably, really
March.
affected us, March, yep. How you guys, how's the Willie the Boatman sort of handled that, or how have you seen the business or the industry handle that?
Yeah, look, it was pretty, it was jaw-droppingly nerve-wracking the first day. And then I was kind of fright or flight for me, to be honest. And so they locked us down on the Sunday for the Monday, and I was pretty ashened. So I'll just give you sort of our perspective to start with. So I was pretty ashened on that first Monday. I didn't know what to do. I rang a number of large retailers, and I said, you've got to up your take, or else we're going to go. Well, you'll lose us, or we'll lose the business. Thankfully, a number of them did take me up on that, and were very generous in their purchases. But the other thing it did was it realised we flipped everything within a week. We flipped into cans.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we set up an online shop within 2 days. We had over 300 kegs in storage. We had 100 kegs that we had to credit app, give the money back, and pick up the kegs. And then while that was going on, I was frantically working with the design team to produce every beer that we make, and now we're only missing one core range beer and get them into cans. And we were able to empty a lot of our kegs into cans.
Right,
And then it just, you couldn't hit the pavement, but then it was just full on slog, hitting bottle shops. Clearly no point to hit the pubs. They were bleeding.
Yeah.
As I said, they're very big organisations, so they were bleeding, and the bottle shops were flourishing, and people were drinking at home, and I honestly don't see that trend dipping. I actually see it increasing. The people are going to these amazing local bottle shops and picking up, as we said earlier, a mixed 4-pack or a mixed 6-pack and going home and only spending $30 rather than $100 out at a pub or a brewery, you know what I mean? So I think, and you can sit around with your mates and you can, test different beers, and I just see that the growth of home drinking, and I don't mean irresponsible drinking, I mean drinking for the absolute enjoyment of drinking something new, is something that's really going to entrench itself in Australian culture this year. It's not just taking a 6-pack to a barbie anymore. It's, hey, I'm going to go to, David Sellers, I'm going to go to, Steve's Cool Booze, or the Loose Dozen in Dulwich Hill, and pick up a mixed 6-pack and, throw the barbie on, but we'll try all these amazing beers.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where beer consumption's going down, but people are trying to sort of make that push towards drinking for flavour rather than for just getting pissed.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I think, and I always semi-joked about, I always said, the thing about craft beer is it's too fucking expensive to drink to get pissed on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you own a brewery.
Well, I guess, well, that too. Maybe why I want to get into this business.
Yeah, that's it.
Probably end up with no money. Most
probably.
So I guess I won't take up too much more of your time,
right.
Pat, and I really appreciate you letting us come out and share at least an hour with us. Closing thoughts and advice. I guess you've touched on some really good, important points there for people to take home in terms of in their planning and putting together their business plan of opening up. But if you were to summarise some of the biggest things that they can take home now and start doing their homework on, what would that be?
Sure. Well, one, you have to have a business plan.
Yep.
Two, you have to really know your local area. You have to talk to your planners, and you really have to have a good concept of where and when you can, where you can't open a brewery. Then it's about finding the site. Is that applicable to you? Does it fit within all of those council rules? And then finally, it's the money. And don't do it cheaply.
Yep.
Yes, do it cheaply if you've got the skills to turn milk vats into amazing beer producing vessels. But honestly, don't be afraid to put your hat out and go around and speak to family and friends, and get some true get some true capital behind you. I think at the end of the day, you should come into this business, which we didn't certainly do, with about a year's buffer.
Yeah.
That would be a lovely position. I know that's probably, people go, oh, that's outrageous, and yes, it probably is outrageous. But just while you're getting your foot in the door in the market, telling people where your tap room is, and also trying to get taps or fridge space in bottle shops, have some money in the kitty.
Well, thanks again, Pat, for sharing your time. Is there anything that you'd like to sort of mention while I've got you? Anything you'd like to plug? Let the listeners know.
Sure. Look, come in to Willie the Boatman, please. Come in and have a beer. I'm nearly always here. Don't be afraid to come up and say good day. I'm more than willing to have a chat. I'll chat the legs off a chair, to be honest. Just come into your local brewery, support them, ask them questions. And, if you've got any questions about the industry, come in. It's a very open industry. And there's no stupid questions, and there's no secrets.
Excellent. And where can people find and reach you?
Good point. So we're in Precinct 75, 601, 75 Mary Street, St Peters. I had to think about it. 601, 75 Mary Street, St Peters. Enter through Maniacs.
Yes, I got lost.
Yeah, everyone does.
Well, thanks again, Pat, and appreciate you coming on the Build Me a Brewery podcast. We'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast, and I do hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to like, follow, or subscribe across all our social media handles, and if you visit our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and subscribe to our mailing list, you can get exclusive content such as free ebooks and transcripts on all our podcast episodes. So keep on listening and stay tuned for more episodes of the Build Me a Brewery podcast.